I want to show you guys something, and I want to get your feedback on it. And I want to know if I'm making this up. So you tell me. I have been covering Joe's podcast for a year. I've been listening to it for a little bit longer. But I've been, in a sense, attempting to create another layer of dialogue built off of the dialogue that Joe is having. So I did his conversation with Duncan Trussell. This is 209. They've had another conversation since then. And this one was fascinating. I did a podcast on this, and I think I've used clips before. But 209, if anybody's following Joe Rogan, this should clue you in. 208 was when he interviewed Stephen Meyer, the Christian apologist, about the existence of God. And that's Meyer's big thing. Right after Stephen Meyer, he's got Duncan Trussell. Duncan is one of Joe's really good friends. And Duncan was raised an Episcopalian. Listen to what he says. Tell me if I'm crazy or if I'm picking up on something here. Good friend of Joe Rogan's says this.
This is where being raised an Episcopalian. In the book of Revelations, as a Christian, you're going to read it.
Okay. And now that's super nuanced there. That's super, this little teeny phrase. But this clip showed up again in my YouTube feed. And when I heard him say that, I heard it in a different way. And again, maybe I'm making this up. But he says, as a Christian, you're going to read it. He says, the book of Revelation, as a Christian, you're going to read it. He gestures to Joe Rogan when he says that.
In the book of Revelations, as a Christian, you're going to read it. This is.
Am I making this up? Am I making this up? Am I reading too much into this? As a Christian, you're going to read it. Now, what? I talked to Christian about this, Christian Baxter about this. What conversation did they have before this?
In the book of Revelations, as a Christian, you're going to read it.
Do you see that? He says, as a Christian, he gestures his hand towards Joe and says, as a Christian, you're going to read it. There's so much. I was raised as a Christian. You're going to read it. Referring to people raised like him. Okay. Thank you. Okay, good. I like that. Because I want to hear some feedback. I was raised, and as a Christian, you're going to read it. And Joe was raised a Catholic. So there's something, okay, it could just be that he's sort of making a gesture generally. Now, I will say there was a conversation before this. Joe and Duncan talked offline. There was a conversation before this, and I'm not here saying I think Joe Rogan has become a Christian, or even that I think Joe Rogan is going to become a sort of Christian. If he becomes a Christian, it's not going to be like what most people. It's not going to be like a mainline normie evangelical. Let's just say that. That's for sure. But I wonder if they talked before this, and Joe is sort of recovering from, they might have recorded the Stephen Meyer episode. No, that's not true, because he mentions the Stephen Meyer episode to Duncan. 208, Stephen Meyer. 209, Duncan Trussell. And when Joe is talking to Duncan in this interview, he does mention that he had just talked to Stephen Meyer. So I find it a little fascinating, and it's the teeniest, tiniest little glimpse. And I know I'm probably like going too deep, too small of a clip to make a big deal out of it. But it just, when I heard it again, I went, wait a second. As a Christian, you're gonna read it? Like, did Joe say to Duncan, hey man, I've been thinking. I just sat down with this guy, Stephen Meyer. He's a Christian. He's super smart. Like, he's obviously thought about this stuff. He's got all these reasons for believing in God. And he goes into the evidence for the resurrection of Jesus. And I think that is a strong, strong point. And I think Joe still has some sort of misgivings about the Bible and the nature of the Bible, which is where the Diana Walsh Pasulka interview comes in. And I just wonder if he was chatting with Duncan and he just said, I think for the first, like I'm looking back into it because I do think Joe was raised, he was raised Catholic, as far as I know, and it was not a good experience for him. There was some, you can hear it in his voice, and if you go back, who was saying 7 years ago, if you go back, yeah, Mandy pointed this out. If you go back 7 years ago, I mean, Joe is antagonistic towards the Bible, for sure. And now, not so much. And this interview with Diana, I think is like, it's almost like it could be a missing piece of the puzzle. Because if you listen to their interview, it's not like they talk a ton about Christianity or anything like that. They talk about the nature of the spiritual world. They even talk at one point about angels and demons. I haven't gotten to that part yet. Yeah, exactly. And so think about this. And what Mandy's saying is, if you go back years ago to see where Joe Rogan was, just mocking Christianity openly, and still to some degree still has some of this. But to be talking to Diana, to be talking to Stephen Meyer, to be sitting down with Stephen Meyer and talking about the possibility of the miracle of the resurrection of Jesus without being like openly mocking. Again, I wonder, in some ways, there's a sense in which the Joe Rogan podcast, and we'll talk about this as this live stream goes on, because I have some thoughts about the nature of dialogue and our sort of digital dialogue world that we're living in. In some ways, Joe Rogan's podcast is big enough to sort of inform the zeitgeist. But also, it's just a barometer. I think that it is popular because Joe and his guests are bringing up the things that are kind of approachable to everybody else. Like, everybody else is kind of thinking about this. Yeah, he has friends that live a beautiful lives of faith. Okay, and this is where I go back to the Adam Curry episode. It's here, right here. It's 1 year ago. I think that, and again, I don't want to make too much of this, but Adam Curry, it was another one of Joe's good friends. And this episode blew my mind. This is what motivated me, put me over the edge to actually start my own podcast. And I don't know, Adam hasn't been back on the Joe Rogan podcast since then. But the fact that Joe has friends like Adam Curry went on Joe's podcast and just basically said, "Hey, Jesus, I've been thinking about Jesus. And the more I think about Jesus, the more I think that this is what really happened." And it sort of took Joe a little while to digest that, I think. But a year ago, he had Adam Curry on. And then not only is he interviewing like people like Stephen Meyer, who are like overtly Christian, but other people are popping onto his podcast and like slipping into sort of spirituality and Jesus talk. Russel Brand is on there talking about his experience with AA. Jordan Peterson comes on and has that beautiful moment where he talks about how the Bible is not just truth; it's the precondition for the manifestation of all truth. And if you're looking at the Joe Rogan podcast the last year, I wonder if you're seeing what is happening sort of in a lot of people's lives. Okay, so he's not actually angry at Jesus. He's more angry at the corruption in the churches, which is hard for some people to rise above. I think you're exactly right. In fact, I was listening to another podcast today on Grail Country, and I caught just a little bit of it. Let me see if I can find it. And I got that sense from one of the guys that was on there. It was hard for me to hear him talk about Christianity because I felt like the version of Christianity he was giving was so far removed from what I've encountered in Christianity. It was here. Yeah. Tigran is sharing his experience, and it's similar, just seeming like a lot of people in the Christian world are kind of faking it. And if that's the case, I don't know that I want it. I don't know that I want that. And I wonder if you're right, that Joe's experience is probably close to that. Frankly, my experience is close to that. Like, I did not want to become a Christian. I guess that's a simple way of saying it. I did not want to become a Christian. And I don't even know that I found Jesus. It's like Jesus found me, and then I had spent the last 25 years trying to make sense of that. So you remember Adam Curry? Adam Curry a year ago was on Joe Rogan, going back to current day, going back to the present day. And I think I left a link to this one if you guys haven't watched it yet. Going back to this, it was a year ago, almost to the day. It was definitely the same month that he had Adam Curry on and then interviewed Diana. So there's something to that in my mind. There's not no reason for that. There's, maybe it was, accident or whatever, but 1 year ago, it was from Adam Curry going on and basically saying, yeah, I gave my life to Jesus, to Joe interviewing Diana, who was just such a perfect fit, right? I think she's the missing puzzle. She's Catholic Christian. She's got some, I'll just say, interesting ideas. Obviously, I think if I sat down long enough with Diana, I'd find something, we'd find areas where we disagree, but she, how to say it? She didn't talk churchy language. She doesn't talk Christianese, and she knows enough about aliens that it was really intriguing. In this podcast, they do touch on the nature of evil and sort of the abuse there. And I do think that for some people that drives them away from Christianity. For others, it will drive you to Christianity, or really to the person of Jesus, because even the word Christianity can be sort of misunderstood. But and just to be able to have that open conversation, and even to hear Diana saying, I've thought a lot about the problem of evil. They go into the discussion about Plato's cave around that time. Let me see. And it was kind of around the topic of evil and people sort of controlling the narrative. And that's exactly what it is. But I think we're here, and I think dialogue is part of, and again, if you're just listening to this, we're looking at a picture of Plato's cave, and the basic format of it is you have people bound and chained behind a wall so that the only thing they can see in front of them is the back end of the cave wall where shadows are being projected. And it's really important to remember that this is everyone's, the people that are chained and bound, they've accepted this reality. This is the reality that they have accepted, and they just don't know anything else. And yet behind the wall are these puppet masters, if you will, these people that are holding up images that project the shadows on the wall because there's a fire in front of them, and the shadows are projected on the wall for the people that are bound and chained. And then they talked about what Diana said, and this is one point where I would definitely disagree with her. She in the conversation about evil and sort of this, where we are, we're sort of in this condition, we're in a dark cave, chained and bound. Who can rescue us, right? She was saying, all we can do is work on ourselves. And that is part of the conversation. But how do I work on myself? And I just shared this. I think more so than anything, I don't know that I found Jesus. I think Jesus found me. And then I tried to make sense of that. And it takes Jesus, who's not in the cave. He's in the heavenly realm. He's free. It takes the person of Jesus descending to then reveal to us our chains, reveal to us that we're in a dark hole, and reveal to us that we're really grasping at the shadows of the forms. And it's the revelation of God, taking us back to the Bible, that is going to that we need to sort of make sense of reality. What do we then do? We live a life. We have a living sacrifice. Our life needs to reflect this sacrifice that we see in the person of Jesus. And what happens? This cave, this tomb, is transformed into a garden. It's up here, right? We're this. That wasn't in my thinking when we started this live stream, was that we would connect Plato's cave to the tomb of Jesus. But there it is. And I wonder, going full circle, I wonder where we are with this dialogue. I wonder where we are with Joe. I wonder where we are with this. But I think that's it. In the place where he was crucified, there's a garden. In the garden, there was a new tomb, which no one had yet been laid. So when he resurrected in a garden. And the Word became flesh. The Word became flesh. And I think that's what happens when we read the Bible. I think that's what I meant when I said it was sort of a mysterious thing, why the Bible sort of hits me different than others is there is this embodied logos. There's the embodiment of the Word. We're getting back to that. And so, hey, thank you guys for being here. I do appreciate it. I appreciate anytime you comment, share this. Again, if you're catching this after the live stream, share your questions. In some ways, it's awesome that there's sort of two versions of this. There's the live version, and then there's the one that sort of sits there, and you can sort of listen to it and pick and choose the bits that you want to chew on. And man, I do enjoy this. I really do. I really thought that live streaming, I would be super nervous, but I love catching these moments with you guys. And so, I will look forward to the next live stream we have, which should be next Tuesday or Wednesday. And I just look forward to reading more of your comments and catching you guys next time. There is a little bit of a stream delay, so bear with me as I probably just sort of hummed myself here for a second.